I remember this night like it was yesterday, even though I'm 26 now and it happened when I was 12. My parents left me home with my 18-year-old brother Zach for the night. At first, I was excited because it was just me and the big house, which felt like huge freedom at the time. Zach told me he was going out for a few hours with friends and made me promise not to tell Mom and Dad. I agreed because I trusted him, and also, why wouldn't I want the place to myself? He would get in huge trouble if my parents found out, and he knew that. At first, I thought it would be fun to be alone, especially on a weekend night. I ended up in the den where I decided to watch a scary movie while home alone. Not the best idea, which I learned the hard way. I had never been home alone for this long before, especially at night. Halfway through the movie, I started getting scared, not entirely because of the movie itself, but because of the way the house sounded. The random creaks in the floor, the wind brushing against the windows, even the fridge clicking on periodically. Every time the movie made a loud sound, I would flinch and look over my shoulder toward the half-flight of stairs behind the couch, expecting to see someone there. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know why I was subjecting myself to scaring the crap out of myself. I turned off the TV and ran upstairs to my room like a scared little kid running from imaginary demons that follow you the second you turn off the lights. When I got to my room, I went into the bathroom that connected both my room and my parents' bedroom. I brushed my teeth as fast as I could and tried to calm down. After that, I went into my room to play Call of Duty Zombies on my Xbox 360, thinking it would make me a little less scared. I played for a few hours, losing track of time and focusing on the game. Eventually, my team and I died to the zombies, and I got frustrated. I decided it was late and I should go to sleep. Not long after that, I felt the vibration of the front door closing and assumed it was Zach coming back. I lay there awake, listening to the sounds of my brother moving around downstairs. It was odd because usually when he got home, he'd go straight upstairs to his room. Instead, there were weird sounds coming from downstairs for too long, and it started feeling unusual. Subtle footsteps, indescribable thumps and thuds. My stomach started churning. That stupid idea to watch a scary movie was really getting to me. I got up and went to the window to look outside, expecting to see Zach's car in the driveway where he usually parked, but it wasn't there. That's when the real panic set in. I had no cell phone at the time. I was only 12, so I had no way to contact my parents or Zach without leaving my bedroom and going to one of the house phones, which felt impossible at that moment. I quietly tiptoed to my bedroom door to confirm it was locked, knowing the lock could be unlocked from the other side with just a fingernail. If someone wanted to get in, they easily could. I looked around and decided the only safe place to hide was the small crawl-in closet built into the wall of my room. I squeezed inside, carefully shut the door from the inside, and tried to calm myself as I listened. At that point, I vividly remember hoping I was just being overly paranoid and that it was actually Zach. Maybe he parked on the side of the house instead? Seconds later, I heard someone fumbling with the door, trying to get in. Moments later, the door opened. The person was inside my room. I had no idea who it was or what they wanted. I stayed completely still, listening to footsteps moving around my room, feeling the floorboards creak beneath their weight, hearing things being moved and shifted. Every second felt like an eternity. I was terrified the closet door could open at any second and I could be dead. I kept praying it was my brother. I stayed quiet, barely breathing, hoping whoever it was would leave. At one point, I heard them dragging something across the floor, which made me even more nervous. It felt like hours had passed, though it was probably only minutes. Eventually, I heard footsteps moving away from my room. I stayed in the closet for what felt like forever, likely 2 hours, until I finally heard Zach calling my name from across the house. His voice sounded urgent and pissed off. A few moments later, he came into my room and called my name again. I stepped out of the closet, and the first thing he did was yell at me, asking what I was doing in there and what I had done to his room. That was the moment I knew it hadn't been my brother in the house. I explained everything as quickly as I could, still shaking, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Once he understood, we both went through the house together. That's when we realized how bad it really was. Drawers had been pulled out. Electronics were missing, including TVs and gaming consoles. It was clear someone had broken in and stolen anything valuable. Zach immediately called the police. We stayed together, still on edge, checking doors and windows. The police arrived, took a report, wrote down everything that was missing, and asked us questions. They told us to wait for our parents to get home. Around 4 a.m., our parents arrived. My dad was furious and immediately went after Zach, smacking him across the face for being careless, not only leaving me alone, but leaving the front door unlocked. My mom checked on me, hugged me, and said she was just glad I was safe. From that point on, Zach was forced to pay monthly rent to slowly pay back what was stolen and was treated with extreme caution. I wasn't punished at all. I was just shaken, terrified by what had happened. The experience stuck with me for years. Every time I thought about it, I felt the fear all over again, remembering hiding in that closet, hearing someone walk around my room, not knowing if I would make it out alive. It was the scariest experience of my life, and it still stays with me. When I was just a child, not even in kindergarten, I lived with my grandparents. My mom and dad had just separated, and my dad worked in the next town over, so I saw him every weekend. My uncle, my dad's brother, also lived with us, so I was rarely ever truly alone. I was always told never to answer the door for strangers. It was a small, peaceful town where everyone knew each other. We had a neighbor who visited often to watch hockey, wrestling, or join family barbecues. I'll call him David. He was friendly with both my grandpa and my uncle. He drank beers with my uncle, helped my grandpa with yard work and truck repairs, and even helped haul a moose into the shed after hunting. One night, I was briefly left home alone. My grandma was at bingo, and my grandpa was going to pick her up. He asked if I wanted to come, but I refused because I was watching cartoons. He reminded me not to open the door for strangers and then left. As soon as I saw the truck pull away, the house went quiet. Only a few minutes later, someone knocked on the door. I ran up and asked who it was. I heard David's familiar voice. I told him my grandparents weren't home. He said he had just seen my grandpa leave. I told him my uncle wasn't home either, and he said he had been talking to my uncle on the phone and knew he was out drinking at a friend's place. Then he asked to come in. I told him I wasn't allowed to open the door for strangers, and he insisted he wasn't a stranger since he was our neighbor and someone I already knew. In my child's mind, he was right, but I didn't understand why he would come over when my grandpa and uncle weren't there. I unlocked the door and opened it. David towered over me. He was obviously drunk, swaying, slurring, squinting with one eye. He stepped inside and put his hands on my shoulders as I backed up. I didn't feel alarmed yet because I had seen my uncle drunk many times. I told him he could wait in the kitchen while I went back to watch TV, but he wouldn't let go of my shoulders. I tried to pull his hands off me, but I couldn't. His voice changed, filled with anger, and he said things that frightened me. I can't remember the exact words now, only the fear they put in me. He dragged me into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife. He pressed the tip against my belly and asked if I wanted to be stabbed. When I cried, he told me to quiet down or he would cut my tongue or my throat. He dragged the dull side of the blade across my throat to show he was serious. Then I heard my grandparents' truck pulling in. Car doors closed outside. Relief flooded me, and I was about to scream for help, but David clamped his hand over my mouth. He turned us toward the doorway just as my grandma entered. Her smile vanished when she saw him holding me with a knife. She screamed for my grandpa to get inside immediately. My grandpa rushed in, yelling in shock and fury as he demanded to know what was happening. He took one look at David holding me hostage and charged forward, shouting at him with pure rage. David shoved me to the floor. My grandma rushed over, grabbed me tightly, and blocked my view while telling me I was safe. I could still hear the struggle. Eventually, my grandpa overpowered him. When I finally looked up, my grandpa was shoving David out the door, yelling at him to never come back, then slamming the door shut. As I grew up, I realized David had waited deliberately. He must have known my uncle wasn't home and that my grandma was at bingo. He had seen my grandpa leave. That was his moment. I was too young to understand his intentions. Years later, after my grandpa's funeral, I was sitting with my grandma talking about memories. I brought up that night and how heroic Grandpa had been. She looked uneasy and said it was truly a terrifying night. She asked if I remembered that my grandpa went hunting that same night. I faintly remembered him leaving, even though hunting at night wasn't something he usually did unless it involved camping. When I asked why he left, she said she didn't remember much. It got me thinking. They never called the cops or pressed charges, and I never saw David again. After that night, my grandpa was respected in the community. He was friends with people who went to the same church as some police officers and was known to be a good hunter. No one would ever question seeing a bloody tarp in the back of his truck as he drove out of town late at night. This story happened a few years ago during spring break in 2020, when I was 15. I was home alone one night while my parents were out of town. I was hanging out in my room when I got a call from a mutual friend from school who I'll call Mason. I don't usually get calls or even texts from Mason, but I answered anyway. Before I could say anything, he asked what I was doing. I told him I was just at home and not up to anything. He then asked if he could drop off one of my buddies because he needed a place to stay for the night. This buddy, who I'll call Neil, was someone I'd known since 3rd grade. I told Mason I didn't feel like having company over and just wanted to be alone. After that, Mason practically begged me to let Neil stay at my house. I could hear desperation in his voice. I was reluctant at first, but then Mason said he'd let me use his weed pen. I caved. Looking back, I realize how stupid it was to let something like that persuade me, especially considering what happened next. But I was a dumb pothead at the time, so what can you do? Neil had always been very outgoing, with zero filter, and he didn't care what people thought of him. The week before, my brother and other friends told me Neil had started acting really strange in class. At first, I didn't think much of it. When I asked my brother to explain, he said Neil would randomly start laughing or clapping in the middle of silence and say strange things, like claiming the basketball coaches were Freemasons trying to convert him. That's when I realized Neil wasn't acting normal. But it wasn't until Mason and Neil arrived at my house that I understood how bad it really was. I met them at the front door, greeted them like any other day, and hit Mason's weed pen as promised. As Mason was about to leave, he grabbed Neil by the shoulders. Tears formed in his eyes as he pleaded with him not to do that thing. Neil stared at him blankly and casually said he understood. I should have asked what was going on, but I didn't. I let Neil inside and closed the door as Mason left. The first thing Neil asked was whether all the doors in the house were locked. Red flags immediately went off in my head. I told him they were and asked why. He told me to check, so I led him down the hallway to show him that the back door and laundry room door were locked. After I confirmed it, we stood in silence. Then, out of nowhere, he raised his hand like he was asking a question and flashed an eerie, toothy smile that I can still see clearly in my mind. He held it for a few seconds, then slowly lowered his arm without saying a word. I forced a fake chuckle to make the situation feel less weird. Neil asked for some water, so we went into the kitchen. As I grabbed bottles from the fridge, I noticed him lingering by the silverware drawer. I watched him slowly open it and reach for a steak knife. Without thinking, I ran over, grabbed his hand before he could take it, and slammed the drawer shut. Neil didn't react. He didn't move. He just stared at me and let out a small chuckle, like he was pretending it was a joke. My heart was pounding in my ears. I was frozen in fear, the kind people describe in life-or-death situations. I had never truly felt like my life was in danger until that moment. All I could think about was how to get Neil out of my house. He broke the silence by suggesting we go to the park in the neighborhood. I agreed like nothing had happened. We walked toward the laundry room leading to the driveway, and I intentionally let him go out first. I told him I needed to put my shoes on. He paused, looked disappointed, and told me to hurry up. I shut the door, locked it immediately, and called my brother to explain what had just happened. After the call, I gathered every knife in the kitchen and brought them upstairs to my room. I was stoned, so my decision-making wasn't perfect, but I knew I needed to stop him from forcing his way back inside. My brother arrived with 3 friends in less than 5 minutes. They met Neil outside. I stayed inside for a bit, then went out. Neil was rambling about the school's basketball coaches being in the Illuminati and claiming they would sexually assault players to make them perform better. After a few minutes of nonsense, we decided to take him home. There was no way I was letting him stay after what had happened. Even though Neil insisted he couldn't go home because he believed his dad was going to kill him, my friends eventually took him back. After all of this, I called Mason and asked what Neil had said to him that made him act that way. And Mason explained that during the car ride, Neil had been reading a manifesto claiming he needed to kill himself or someone else to prevent his dad from trying to kill him. Mason had panicked and just wanted to get rid of Neil, which explained why he sounded so desperate to drop him off at my house earlier. After hearing this, I lost my mind and asked Mason why he would just dump Neil at my house without warning me, though I knew part of the fault was mine for not asking sooner. Later, it was revealed that Neil had taken drugs he shouldn't have, which triggered schizophrenic episodes and caused him to hear voices. About a month later, I told my mom the story, and she was not thrilled, to put it lightly. Needless to say, I avoided something truly horrific that night by being on edge when Neil entered the house, and I still think about what could have happened if I hadn't paid attention to him in the kitchen. I was 10 years old when this happened. My mom had gone grocery shopping that day and asked if I wanted to come. I remember making a big stink about not wanting to. It was a warm, sunny afternoon, and I just wanted to stay home and shoot hoops in the street. I told her nothing bad would happen and that she would only be gone for a couple of hours. She finally gave in and let me stay. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed the old basketball from the garage and started shooting around in the street where we had a hoop set up. I played little games with myself, pretending I was down and winning with a buzzer shot. I was sweating from running back and forth, and at one point I stopped to catch my breath. I bounced the ball lazily and looked around the neighborhood. That's when I looked up toward the house, at the upstairs window. Someone was staring down at me. At first, it was only a shadow behind the glass, like someone standing back from the sunlight. I stared for a second or two before the shape shifted slightly, and I realized it wasn't a trick of the light. Someone was up there at the window, looking out at the street. None of my family was supposed to be home. My sister was at college, my dad was at work, and my mom was across town buying groceries. I dropped the basketball without meaning to. The window was my sister's room. The blinds were half open, and the figure was standing right behind them. I say figure because that's all I saw, no distinguishable features. I didn't know what else to do except run inside and see who was home. I ran around the side of the house and through the backyard gate, burst inside, and slammed the door shut behind me. I yelled up the stairs asking who was home. My voice cracked, and for a moment, I didn't hear anything. Then a voice answered from upstairs. It said, "Brad, come upstairs." It wasn't my mom. It wasn't my sister. It wasn't my dad. The voice was deeper than any of theirs, but not deep like a grown man trying to sound scary. It sounded like someone trying to sound normal. I didn't go anywhere near the stairs. I ran straight through the house, grabbed the house phone off the kitchen counter, and sprinted outside as fast as I could. I called my mom and told her someone was in the house. At first, she didn't believe me. She told me it wasn't something to joke about and said she was almost done shopping. But I started crying into the phone, telling her I wasn't joking. I told her I heard someone call my name from inside and that someone had been at the upstairs window. She finally believed me when I started sobbing and begging her to come home. She said she was leaving the store immediately. After she hung up, she must have called the police, because a cop car pulled up at the same time my mom's car turned into the driveway. She ran to me and asked where I saw the person. I pointed to the upstairs window. The police went in first. My mom followed them inside. I waited outside. I didn't want to go back in. For 10 minutes, I stood there staring at the upstairs window, and no one appeared again. Eventually, one of the officers came out and told me it was safe to come inside. I went in and pointed upstairs to the room where I had seen the man. They checked the closets, under the bed, behind the dresser, and even the attic. They checked every room in the house. They didn't find anyone or anything. After the police left, my mom started acting doubtful again. She said she believed me, but I could tell she didn't fully. She said if she found out I was messing around, I'd be punished for scaring her and wasting the police's time. I kept telling her I wasn't lying. She kept saying she knew, but her voice said something else. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. I kept thinking about the voice and the shadow behind the blinds until I finally drifted off. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. It was still dark, and at first I thought I had woken from a bad dream. Then I heard something in my room, just loud enough to wake me. I sat upright in bed. My eyes were adjusting to the dark, but I could see the outlines of my room. I could see my dresser, my shelves, my closet door cracked open, and across the room, not far from my bed, I saw something else. An unfamiliar shape. A tall, dark shape standing completely still. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. Then the slightest movement made me realize what it was. It was a person, a full-grown person standing in my bedroom. I didn't even have time to breathe. I screamed, a loud, broken scream that tore out of my throat. As soon as I screamed, the figure moved. It darted across my room in 2 steps, grabbed my window, slid it open, and jumped out. I heard the man's feet land on the small awning below the window. My parents burst into the room. My dad ran straight to the window, looked out, then ran downstairs and out the back door to try to find whoever it was. I'm fairly certain he ran out barefoot. He came back a few minutes later, out of breath, shaking his head, saying he didn't see anyone. They called the police again, but this time it was mostly just another incident report and a quick search of the area. We don't know how long he was in the house. All I know is that he was inside during the day, long enough to know my name. He watched me from my sister's window and stayed in the house until nightfall. Or he snuck in and out through my bedroom window by climbing onto the awning. Either way, he was in my room while I slept. Standing there in the dark. Who knows what else he did while he was in the house? That's the scariest part.